Let's move forward here to some injury updates from Week 12 that will matter in Week 13. Let's start with a few that actually took place this past weekend, Stephania, before some other injuries. Chris Olave for the Saints, what's going on there?
Yeah, Chris Olave and Raheed Shaheed, might as well talk about them together. It's both happened this week. Chris Olave with a concussion, injured in the third quarter, didn't return. Prior to his exit, he looked like the guy. 7 catches for 114. Remember, Michael Thomas is out and on injured reserve, so there was kind of a question of what's going to happen with Chris Olave. And to me, I also wanted to see what Raheed Shaheed would do. So this week, they face the Lions. We will see if Chris Olave is back or not. Raheed Shaheed has a quad injury. He was just 2 for 9 when he exited the game. If you were watching the game, you saw him throw his helmet, like heave it on the ground in frustration. It sounds like he's unlikely to play this week. That, according to Nick Underholt at New Orleans Football. Dennis Allen said he had a pretty good quad injury there. But yet they're calling him day-to-day. So don't quite know what to make of it. These soft tissue injuries can always be problematic for wide receivers. So I just think, you don't count on anything. But I would make other plans. I think they could very well be without both Olave and Shaheed.
New Orleans Football, by the way, that's a great website. Go check it out if you haven't already.
Our former colleague, Mike Triplett.
Yes, indeed. Tripp is the best. You want to play a little game of trivia here?
Oh, I'm probably going to. I stink at trivia.
Do you want to guess a Saints receiver who's healthy right now?
Perry.
A.T. Perry.
A.T. Perry.
Yeah. That's one. Lynn Bowden Jr., who had 2 carries for 40. He's kind of a hybrid. He was, of course, a quarterback back in.
Does Taysom Hill count as like I'll do anything, like
maybe?
flex?
Sort
like
of.
Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson.
But
he's not a receiver, but he's going to catch patches.
As a matter of fact,
catch passes.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned tight ends, though, there, because at one point, Dennis Allen kind of referenced the possibility of Jimmy Graham being part of the cures to their wide receiver roles. Jimmy Graham has been a healthy scratch for a long time here now.
He's been there,
desperate times, though, is what I'm saying in New Orleans. So might be, we'll see, obviously,
Alvin
on Olave.
Kamara. He's a pass catcher.
Alvin Kamara might project for about 30 catches on Sunday against the Lions. Pop Douglas, perhaps the Patriots' only pass catcher that matters in fantasy. Stephania, what's going on there?
Guess what? Now he has a concussion. This is his second concussion of the season. He missed a game in Week 6 due to a concussion. Since he came back in Week 7, he's been targeted 4 to 6 times every single week. We've been talking about him every week as somebody you could and should be adding potentially if you needed a deep flex. But he's, likely to miss if we go by patterns, but we do not know for sure. I would say second concussion within the season, definitely a concern.
A little bit nervous,
but consider this. There are other receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker. They each have missed 2 games with a concussion. Kendrick Bourne out for the season with a torn ACL. Slim pickings over there, and then an offense that just you can't write home about.
Yeah, I mean, and on paper, this should be the weekend to do it, right? Yeah, I would. Let's plant the flag. It's gonna be Bailey Zappi. Don't kid yourself, people. It'll be Bailey Zappi in Week 13 against the Chargers, which on paper seems like a pretty decent matchup, right? It seems. However, they did play good defense on Sunday night against Baltimore, very good defense, and then the Patriots they stink. That's as bad of an offense as there is right now in the NFL. So if you're looking for a next man up at the wide receiver spot, that's long shot territory on fantasy football now, that is it. A couple more injuries to note, Stephania, here, and let's begin with one that pertains to Thursday night football in Seattle.
Yes, Kenneth Walker. So everybody missed him this week with an oblique strain. I think if you were hoping you were going to get big things from Zach Charbonnet, sort of not the result you were looking for, but Kenneth Walker had the oblique injury that kept him out. Now they play on Thursday night, so this is really something to watch. He was listed as a non-participant on Monday, but yet Pete Carroll said there is a chance that he will play. They plan to not really practice him much this week. So this is going to be one of those you're not going to know until game time. And then the question becomes, how comfortable do you feel? I think they felt like the injury was not as bad as it could have been. But, man, Kenneth Walker, when he's on the field,
he's
hard
special.
to ignore.
Can we just talk about the fact that Pete Carroll's actually an NBA coach? I mean, he really is, right? The way that they load manage players during the week is it's incredible. It's one of one.
Yeah.
Like the way that Kenneth Walker III gets treated in terms of practice time would make you think he's like 36, right? Like I see guys who get like the rest days, right? Like guys who are actually 36. So it's like, hey, Trent Williams taking a rest day for the 49ers. The guy's been around since the 2010 NFL draft. Kind of makes sense, right?
big man. Who
big man, right? Yeah, right. Meanwhile,
need to run around
Walker III is like 22.
Yeah, but here's the other way you could look at it is that Pete Carroll has survived running back misery from multiple injuries and not getting through a season.
Oh, I'm not blaming him. I'm just shutting him out.
You know what? Like, if you show up on Sunday and you can run, that's all I care about.
That's all that matters. Yeah, Pete, very player friendly. So when the NBA brings back the Seattle Supersonics, which bring back the Sonics. Everyone knows that should happen yesterday. But with the NBA expanding, likely in the near future, to 2 extra markets, we all love that to be Seattle. I nominate Pete Carroll to be the coach because he's already got the management thing down. Right? Like, back-to-backs, not going to play.
Although,
3 games in 4 nights.
Not a thing anymore in the NBA. They're not allowed to load.
They still find a way. They still find a way there, right?
We could get that is a whole separate conversation because I do think that's actually warranted. There's literature to support it, so that's a different conversation. But in the NFL, I am 1,000% for it because there's only 17 games that you play. It is brutal every single week. These guys absolutely should load manage, but they should train harder in the offseason. That's my platform, and that's where I'm saying.
Hold on now, Stephania. Don't get the player started, right? I mean, it's like...
listen, I know a couple players, ex-players, who agree with me on this.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it's
because if you can't come to camp and get in shape during camp anymore. Because camp is managed.
Don't get me started. This is a whole thing that you can get me on. And I'm not a player. I empathize. You said you're an empath earlier. Like I respect that these guys have certain limitations that they believe are important for them. But it is amazing how much things have changed over the past 30 years. They used to play 6 preseason games a year in the NFL. They used to have 3 days in the NFL during training camp. Like, we are in a totally different world.
You could look at this as a contributing factor for the injuries across the season.
I have no doubt. I am no medical expert, but I have no doubt about that. All right, so a couple more here, Stephania, that were recently. Do you want to start with T. Higgins or which one next year?
T. Higgins is fine. Just a reminder that he has had this hamstring injury since practice on November 8th, and he's been out since, and we haven't really known what to do with him because he has not practiced at all. Possibility, according to Zach Taylor, was kind of answering it like, I think so, that he could be back. Not that it's hard to know how to trust someone, a wide receiver coming off a hamstring injury. We've talked before about the average being somewhere between 4 to 5 games missed for a hamstring injury. But if he's back, there's certainly a possibility that he is a receiver who's back. And it all matters this week because there are 6 teams on bye.
Yeah.
You have to consider everybody who's back, who's definitely going to be, somebody who could potentially catch a pass when it's getting that critical for fantasy.
We'll track this on Thursday because they play Monday night. So there are 2 complicating factors here with T. Higgins.
Right.
3 really is 2. 1, he plays on Monday night.
First practice report, not till Thursday.
Yep. So you're not going to know for sure whether he's going to give it a go until potentially Monday during the day, right? Second of all is that, like, he's been up and down. I guess the third factor is that he's got Jake Browning now. Right? So a very complicated decision with T. Higgins. If you're super desperate and you got crunched by the buys this week, I get it, holding out some hope. If you've been able to manage without T. Higgins, though, I think I would ride with whatever plan that you have been on.
They play
the past
at the
month
Jaguars for what that's worth.
Tough. All right, so one more here. Stay in the state of Ohio, but I guess temporarily in California as the Browns spending the week at UCLA. What's going on with Amari Cooper?
Yeah, they're a banged up bunch, the Browns are, but Amari Cooper was one of those who had a rib injury and missed the rest of the game after he got hurt. Kevin Stefanski said that the x-rays came back negative. This was after the game. Here's what I'll say to you about that. X-rays are often negative with rib injuries. What it tells you is there's not a significantly displaced fracture, something very obvious that they see, but there are a number of times where players have an x-ray that's negative, but something shows up a little bit later on a more definitive imaging. They often will go by pain tolerance with these. Really a question of how he progresses through the week, but stay tuned.
Never thought I'd be saying this in week 13 of the NFL regular season, but the only way that I would start Amari Cooper this week, even with 6 teams on a bye, is if Joe Flacco starts for the Browns.
Can you imagine?
Which certainly sounds like it's possible, right? I mean, obviously DTR being in the concussion protocol opens the door for Flacco, and I get it. He's been there for 10 minutes. I still trust him more than what I've seen from DTR and Phillip Walker this season.
They sounded very positive about him.
I think
he's a veteran presence. He's going to get them through a game.
They didn't sign Joe Flacco to not eventually start him, right? Like, you don't sign him to just have him sit there and hold a clipboard for the rest of the season. They knew. I mean, unless DTR took off and became a star.
Even if DTR is healthy, again, remember, when guys are in a concussion protocol, and you're talking about the position that requires the most processing of any position. So in a foreign environment because they went out to California. They're not home. They're not in their usual routine. He took a big hit. You saw him leaving. His lip was bloody.
It was smashed.
Right. Yeah. So now add to that he's this young new quarterback, difficult, trying to prepare at a time where you're in recovery from a concussion. They may not say it yet, but I really think it's going to be Joe Flacco.
I'm with you on that. Let's talk about 3 players, Stephania, that have been out or missed some period of time recently. And I think it's finally, a fairly straightforward decision for Justin Jefferson.
Finally. But listen, this was, I also think that there was no formula here. I don't think it was team being sneaky. I think they have been actually incredibly transparent on this. And Justin Jefferson was really about how he felt as he progressed back from this hamstring injury that has cost him so much time. They feel good about where he is. They get the bye week this week, week 14. I anticipate you will see Justin Jefferson.
Great news right there. I'm here to tell you, by the way, I'm going to start him. Aaron Jones, Stephania, missed last week for the Packers, and they have begun their practice because they had the bonus practice this week. They play the Chiefs on Sunday night. Any chance we see Aaron Jones?
There's a chance. So this is a tough one because of the history here. So this is an MCL sprain for Aaron Jones. Remember, go back to the game where he was hurt a couple weeks ago. He left on a cart. He was, just devastated. He thought he had torn his ACL. He said afterward he thought he couldn't catch a break after missing all the time with the hamstring injury. This was the same knee. So same-sided injury, ends up with an MCL sprain. Now, he's had MCL sprains in the past, 2, in fact, and he's come back after missing just 1 game. Yeah. So everybody's looking at that like this is he's a guy who recovers fairly quickly from these. It was the opposite side injured before. But now you're talking about 2 consecutive injuries on that same leg. I think they're a little more cautious with him. Not so sure about this week.
We'll track that one
day at a time.
Wednesday is the first injury report because although they practiced on Monday, it was the bonus practice. No injury report required right there. If Aaron Jones is out, we know this. You don't play a Packers running back. A.J. Dillon's had so many spots, and he has continued to underwhelm in what should be a very fantasy-relevant role.
And by the way, Chiefs at the Packers.
Ooh, man, that's a fun game, huh? Packers, though, all of a sudden have some serious life.
Yeah.
Playoff life, the Packers and Rams, all of a sudden very much in the NFC playoff picture. They are rooting hard for the Cowboys on Thursday night against the Seahawks. Seattle 6-5 right now.
I think Cowboys have the edge there.
Yes, I would agree. Dak Prescott's pretty decent. Devon Achane, Stephania. Missed last week, last Black Friday for the Dolphins, and Jeff Wilson played a whole lot more as a result of it. Do we think he's back this Sunday against the Commanders?
I do. As of right now, I think he's back. I think this was more of a scare than a true injury. Remember, he had been on injured reserve because of the sprained MCL, and he comes back and very quickly goes out again, and everyone's nervous, understandably so. But I think he got in a pile, knee gets tweaked, had pain immediately. By the end of the game, he was lobbying to come back in, and this is where Mike McDaniel was like, no, we're just, you've been out for a while. Sure. Let's make sure that you're good. And this is actually very normal that a player comes back and there was some kind of apprehension from just getting tackled. That's why we say you want to see a player go down and come back up and make sure they're not hurt. Yep. So I think that all happened, and I think he's in good shape for this week. We'll see what the practice reports say. Yeah, we'll see indeed here, Stephania. I think, that he's such just an unbelievably game-changing fast player. You just hope that, I'm not talking fantasy right now. You just hope that, he's a pint-sized guy, right? He's tiny,
You hope that these injuries don't become a thing that defines his career. This is the 3rd one in, 12 weeks of NFL action for Devon Achane.